Hello, everybody. This is Hunter, and today I want to talk about some random thoughts I have as a late diagnosed autistic man. I'm 57 years old, and I was diagnosed at age 56. So I guess the first random thought that I have is that I've noticed that a lot of the other autistic YouTube creators started their channel not too long after they were diagnosed, just like I did. It's probably because autism becomes your special interest when you're late diagnosed, because it explains so many things about your life. It explains 57 years of experience for me. And it also becomes important to us to find community, and to also, we kind of want to give something to the community because we know what other autistic people have been through. You know, being autistic feels like you're an alien visiting a different planet. And on this planet, nothing really seems to make much sense. Another thought that I have is that I'm a minority here on this planet. And it's not because of the way I look, but because of the way I'm wired. Now, I've read from several sources that the majority of autistic people are also ADHD, but I'm not. I'm only autistic. So I've learned that I'm not only a minority, I'm a minority within a minority. So it's kind of like, are you kidding me? I've spent my life feeling alienated and feeling different. And this diagnosis explains why I felt that way, because I was different. And that's another thing about getting the diagnosis, a late diagnosis. It explains almost everything about you. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking everything. And it explains so many of the experiences you had too. One thing, though, is that while it explains why you were the way you were, it doesn't explain necessarily why you were treated the way that you were. So many of us were treated badly. And I wasn't treated very well myself. And growing up, I experienced quite a bit of abuse. And now as an adult in his 50s, I can look back objectively, and I have to say I didn't deserve any of it, not a bit of it. So it's kind of hard not to be bitter. You know, I remember, most of you know who Mr. Rogers is. He had his own television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I watched it when I was a little kid, and it meant a lot to me because he was the only adult that was telling me that I was special and that I had worth. And I remember I saw a clip when he accepted an award. I think it was a television award one time. And during his speech, he asked the audience to close their eyes and for just 1 minute and to think of one person that really made a difference to them uh, in their childhood. And I sat there and I couldn't think of anybody. And finally I thought, well, Mr. Rogers. And so, anyway, what I'm getting at is that I had a lot of ill treatment growing up. So it's kind of hard not to be a little resentful and bitter, and also to not be resentful and bitter um, that the world is set up the way it is. That it's just such a crazy world. To me, it's so strange that they call autism a disorder because we don't act like everybody else. When everybody else, to me, seems like they're disordered. To be driven so much by competition and having to beat other people and determining their worth by how they compare to other people, and then speaking in these weird codes and not just saying what they mean, and they seem to thrive on drama and chaos and so forth. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just saying that all that stuff to me seems disordered. I don't consider not knowing how to play the game or to play games to be a disorder, or not doing things the way they want, or using a different process to get the same or better results. I think people equate the idea of a quote disorder with not being like everybody else. Some other thoughts are that I've come to realize that other people in conversation, they don't want you to go deep. That people like to keep things shallow. And I don't like that. Uh, I don't connect at all if it's just shallow. And it just seems like a waste of time to me to have a conversation that's shallow or that's not deep. Um, I don't know, and I have no idea what goes through other people's heads, and I think that's kind of a characteristic of being autistic to some degree, and I think I probably got that more than most. I really don't understand what goes through other people's minds, and especially neurotypicals. Yeah. Um, and I can't, because I don't have a brain like theirs. So, but thinking of that, they don't have a brain like mine, so I guess I can't expect them to understand me either. So I try to remember that. And I've realized that when I say the sky is blue, I mean the sky is blue. I mean that and only that. I don't mean, hey, it's a good time to go fishing, or the sky is bluer where I am than where you are, so you should move here. Um, but I'm realizing that's not true really with most other people. Or that if you do say something real simple like that there's got to be some kind of hidden meaning, or something to decode. You have to read between the lines. And I'm realizing that if people don't know me, and sometimes even if they do, they attribute the same kind of thought processes to me that they have. That, a lot of people assume everybody thinks the way they do, and I certainly don't. Which brings up another point. For most of my life, I thought everybody experienced the world the same way I do. You know, they heard noises the same way that I do, or they took things literally the way that I do, and they think of other people the same way I do, and so on. And now I realize that no, that's not true at all. And of course, that explains so many things too. And you know, this whole socializing thing, being social and having friends and so forth, anything to do with being social, I don't get it. And it's tough for me. I'm still baffled. I'm not only baffled by neurotypical people, but by autistic people as well. And it's a little uh, it's tough, you know, to realize that. And so I just don't get that whole socializing thing and other people thing. It's really tough for me. I do know I really care for other people, and I don't have any doubt about that. But I don't know what's going through their heads, whether they're neurotypical or autistic. Um, and I still don't feel completely safe really being totally myself and not being careful, you know, around anybody. Again, it doesn't matter if they're neurotypical or autistic. I haven't conquered what's called RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. In other words, you're sensitive to rejection, and you've got a kind of a fear of rejection, I guess. And I hate to use that word fear, but I haven't conquered that by any means. And you know, when you spent so much of your life being marginalized and ignored and rejected, it stays with you. And I will say that I can tell you that this rejection that I've experienced was very much not imagined. I mean, maybe some of it, but the vast majority definitely was not. So that's something that, you know, I'm a late diagnosed autistic man that I deal with. Okay, well, you've probably heard of something called imposter syndrome. Well, in the autistic community, we use that to mean that we sometimes may doubt whether or not we're really autistic. And I'm not saying this to say that, wow, look at me, I'm hot stuff, you know, but I don't really struggle with imposter syndrome. I really have no doubt that I'm autistic. You know, the more I've learned about it, and it has become a special interest of mine, and I've researched and really dug into it. And no, I don't have any doubt that I'm autistic. And I told my brother and sister about my diagnosis, and it didn't even faze them one bit. I mean, everybody knows I'm different. And so I don't really struggle with that. But at the same time, I get it if other autistic people do sometimes, because it's really important to us to be authentic. I mean, that's true of me. So none of us want to be an imposter. So it's really important to us to know that we're not an imposter. So I get it when you feel that way, and I'm sorry that there are times that you do. But the interesting thing is that I do sometimes have imposter syndrome about other stuff because I am autistic. Sometimes I don't take myself as seriously as I probably should because I have accomplished a lot. But uh, sometimes I feel a little bit like an imposter in other areas, I guess, and I don't like that. But also, when I sit and think about it objectively, I realize, no, you're not an imposter in these other areas. No, you're the real deal, uh, but that's something we struggle with. You know, after discovering that I'm autistic and self-diagnosing for a long time, and then getting an official diagnosis, um, I have some answers and sort of an explanation for so many things. And I can be so much easier on myself and more accepting of myself. And that's a big deal. And I can stop trying to be anything that I'm not and never will be. I hope that you are easier on yourself too. You know, once you find out that you're autistic, I think you should give yourself a break after all you've been through. And as a late diagnosed adult, you wonder who else in your life might be autistic or might have been autistic if they've passed away, especially in your extended family. In my family, my paternal grandfather, my dad's father, was probably the most likely to have been autistic. Um, he really stuck to himself, and he was unfortunately not, he was unapproachable most of the time, and I didn't feel real comfortable trying to talk with him because sometimes he just didn't want to talk, and it was obvious, and he was very stern. Um, and he, when we would get together for Thanksgiving at his house, uh, there would be a lot of family there. You know, aunts and my aunt and uncle and my cousins, and he would go outside while we were all inside, you know, and go out and work in the yard and stuff. It was hard for him to be in the middle of all that. So I suspect he might have been, or I don't know, that maybe I got a lot of traits from him, even if he wasn't autistic. But that's something when you're late diagnosed, you start wondering about other people who may not know because you know that you yourself didn't know for so long and had no clue. Speaking of not knowing and having no clue or whatever, when I first started investigating autism, there were several things that drove me to do that. The one thing that kept me from thinking that I could be autistic is that there is this uh, misconception that's passed around that autistic people lack empathy. And so, you know, when I read that, you know, this supposedly autistic people lack empathy, I thought, well, that rules me out because I, um, I almost have an issue with empathy where it almost makes things hard. I have so much of it, and I'm not trying to say, hey, I'm Superman or something, but I just mean that if somebody feels bad, even a stranger, I'm finding out, um, it's really hard for me. Uh, and really bothers me and gets to me. So if it's somebody that I do know and do care about, it really it almost drives me nuts. I mean, I don't mean to be facetious, but it's hard. And at the same time, somebody that I care about is happy. Oh my gosh, um, that's that's the best feeling on earth. And so when I read that, that all of the autistic people lack empathy, I thought, well, I thought I had the answer, but that's not the answer. I'm not autistic. And but finally, I found out different and was able to go ahead and realize that I am autistic and get a diagnosis. But that's a really dangerous misconception, and it bothers me because it may keep other people from getting a diagnosis or making important discoveries about themselves. Another thought that I have is that I'm very much okay not being like everybody else. I don't want to be. I'm not crazy about how hard it is, however, um, but I'm okay with not being like everybody else. I kind of like it. When you get diagnosed late, your whole life flashes before your eyes. You reframe everything in terms of your autistic mind, and you go over your entire life, from the start to where you are now, and you look at it from the perspective of, oh, now I know that I was autistic the entire time. And you go over so many things. And me, I just think, my life, my childhood, my past, what a whirlwind, what a ride, a journey, trip. And something else is you definitely wonder how your life would have been different if you'd been diagnosed earlier, especially if you'd been diagnosed as a child. I've definitely wondered that. Would it have been better? I don't know. When I was a child, there was no internet. There wasn't internet until I was almost 30. So there wouldn't have been any kind of autistic community and no way to find other autistic people. So I speculate that I still would have felt extremely isolated and different. That's a big thing, though. A late diagnosed adult wonders how it might have been different if they had been diagnosed earlier. As a late diagnosed man who is 57 years old, there's always a tinge of sadness. You kind of grieve for your past life, especially with me, my childhood. I'll see a picture of myself from back then, and I feel so bad for that little boy in the picture, and I just sometimes I know this is weird, but I'll kind of talk to the picture and just say, I'm so sorry for the way things were, and I wish they'd been different. But you know what? You are really special, and you deserved better. And and you're a tough little son of a gun to have gone through what you went through, and you know, so yeah, you have these kind of thoughts, and that the hurt that you went through stays with you. Uh, there's this book that you probably all heard of called "The Body Keeps Score." I've never read the book, but if I'm not mistaken, it just talks about how hard stuff in your life can stay with you, especially traumatic things. Um, and I am a big believer in that. So when I have these feelings, like I'll hear a certain song, for instance, and I'll kind of lose it for a little while. I just kind of let it happen, and I try not to bury it, because it is going to stay with you if you do that, and the body is going to keep score. So there's that. There's a little bit of stuff that stays with you, and this feeling that you wish things had been different, and that you wish things were different, because they're not really. I keep saying this, but they're not set up for you. Uh, this world is confusing and strange to most of us autistics, if not all of us autistics. I thought everyone around me had the same struggles that I did. And I thought, why can't I do life as successfully and carefree as everybody else? There must be something wrong with me, something about my character or my capabilities. Maybe I'm just dumb, And there were some others that thought that about me too, I could tell. Then I realized that I've been autistic all this time, and that I could slowly undo all the garbage that I had been telling myself and believing about myself. So it is somewhat liberating and definitely validating, without a doubt. That's probably the biggest word to describe it: validating. Another big thing is that my autistic traits have become more pronounced as the years go on. I can remember telling my sister years ago, long before I knew I was autistic, that being around crowds was getting harder and harder for me the older I get. So, that's just one example. And it seems like the sensory stuff is more pronounced. It's always been an issue with me, but it seems to be getting more and more difficult as the years go on. The social stuff seems to be getting harder, and sometimes I wonder if it's just I'm just worn out, and I don't mean this to sound angry, but that I'm just kind of fed up with some things, and it's like why would I even want to fool with it anymore? Because it's just it's not, it doesn't feel good, and it doesn't work, and so maybe the autistic traits aren't necessarily becoming more pronounced. I'm just more um, willing to be who I am or something. I'm not sure if that makes any sense at all. But sometimes I can't stand being autistic. Sometimes I love it. I still feel like an outsider and isolated. Maybe not quite as much as I used to, but I felt it for too long. And maybe got kind of comfortable with it. So it's not going to go away very easily, that feeling. Another big thing is, and maybe you feel this way too if you're late diagnosed, I wonder how much of who and what I am is from being autistic and how much of it is from my experience and heredity, environment, etc. I question myself doing the whole YouTube thing sometimes. Um, because any other time I've gotten involved in a group thing or a community thing or putting myself out there, I didn't like it and it didn't go well. And so, this stuff is ingrained in you when you go this long, not knowing that you're autistic. And so um, you just wonder, what am I getting myself into sometimes when you do stuff like me doing this YouTube, you know. Uh, but that brings up another point. The reason I started doing this is because I really, really want to build you up. It's important to me that other autistic people know their worth and to give you encouragement, because I know you probably didn't get a whole heck of a lot of it in your life, and you should have. So that's another thing, being a late diagnosed autistic man, and it's probably true of a lot of you other late diagnosed adults. You want to help and encourage other autistic people, and you want to build them up, and you want to encourage them, and you want to give to them, and you don't want them to feel lesser of themselves that they should, and you don't want them to ever be hurt, and you want them to know their true worth. And I want to build you up because I know what you've been through. I get it. And I think the rest of you feel the same way. Something else is, and I don't know if this has to do with autism or not. I've read that it kind of does, but I don't know. But anyway, I don't feel 57 years old, mentally or physically. I just don't. If you watch old TV shows, even ones from the 70s, which to me is not ancient history. It doesn't seem that long ago to me, but it was. But you watch shows from the 50s, 60s, 70s. When somebody was in their 40s, they seem like people in their 60s today. The way it's like they just decided, well, I'm old, so now I'm going to dress like an old person, act like an old person, and all that. And anyway, what I'm getting at is, that's not me. I don't know. I don't feel 57. And I don't know if any of that made any sense whatsoever, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm diagnosed now, and I feel incredibly validated, but I'm not totally free. There are still things that are hard, still some things that are a mystery to me, and things still aren't easy. I don't feel like I'm totally in the clear. Um, but I can finally realize that there are things about me that aren't going to change. And they don't need to change. Let me just tell all of you out there that if you've made it this far in life, I'm really impressed with you. And you should be too. You should be proud. Because you're very strong. This just came into my head just now, but the definition of, to me, a good definition of courage is if you are apprehensive about something, or you go ahead and push through and do it anyway. And doesn't that describe our life, our daily life? And we do that. So you know what? You've got courage. You're very brave. And you're very capable. And you can start life new. Yeah, the old stuff is there sometimes, but you've made it through. You made it this far. You made it through that stuff. And that's quite an accomplishment. Forgive me if I am not the most flashy speaker on earth, but that's part of being autistic. Um, it's I try not to mask too much, and I'm not very good at it anyway. So even if I tried, it wouldn't make much difference. But I really appreciate you sticking around, listening to me, and I am always interested in your story. If there's some things you want to share, feel free. If you're somebody who is nervous about leaving a comment, a public comment on YouTube, don't worry about that on my channel, on my videos. This is a totally safe space. Well, thank you for hanging out for a while. I appreciate it, and for listening to me. And I would be more than happy to listen to you in return. Until next time, you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
Hello, this is Nigel, and now for some bloopers to brighten your day.
As a late diagnostic.
And here are some from Hunter's previous video, which was a silly one, the game show.
Well, there were several good things that happened today. A, my staff sort of did their job. 3, everyone got a chance to